All right, so here we are. This is going to be a big deal. Why? Because I'm excited. I'm excited about something that's been logistically really difficult to do, and it's taken a lot of planning. And that's just to get all three of us on the same talk at the same time. Mainly because I'm in the United States right now, so it's easier for us to set up our times. And that's I'm here, Christophe Clugston, with Stan Brooks and also Ken O'Neill. And the reason why we're here is that we got some exciting news that we've been working on quite a bit, and we can't confirm a lot right now, other than just to check out how the interest is with everybody and what we're doing, and that is that we each had a path, and it all started with Bruce Lee through Carl James to Mike Sandlin, and we were and a lot with Mike Sandlin, and we have a lot to do to bring that back because the book that came out that everybody should be have read, and if they haven't read it, they should definitely read it if they're interested in Bruce Lee, and that's this book right here, because there's a lot of things that aren't covered in this book, even though this book does go in detail. And one of the things is how Bruce's vision of fighting came about, and who really took it and did what Bruce meant, and we know the guy who did that. So we are three different representations of Mike Sandlin's influence of JKD, which JKD was earth-shattering, changed everybody's thing. Bruce Lee was iconoclastic, and either people loved him or hated him. Same thing with me. Kind of, I did that version 2.0 of him later. And we represent different time periods because Stan was the first guy. He started training in 1970, and then Ken 1974, and then I started in 1985. So we're the only ones. That's it. We're the only ones in this branch still around that can instruct, that were given the go ahead. Anyway, so I'm going to pass it off to Ken O'Neill, who can give you some more insight into what exactly I'm babbling about.
Yeah, guys. So Christophe and I have talked about this, and you've seen Stan maybe once or twice. Stan, how many times have you talked live with us? 2 times.
I think it's been twice.
Yeah, he just held 2 fingers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one step back. Yeah, just a correction. Stan in 1970. I was 1973.
Okay.
Okay, not a huge deal, but just for the record.
All right.
So you've heard us talk that there's the three of us that go back to this original St. Louis or East St. Louis, Illinois, St. Louis, Missouri branch. And for you guys who don't know, they're just across the Mississippi River from each other. They're very close. They're sort of like one big metropolitan area. But the East St. Louis side was the home where it really got kicked off. Mike Sandlin and Carl James, who'd grown up together, and Mike training Carl, and then Mike and Carl talking about somebody going out and seeing what this Bruce Lee thing is, and Carl was the guy. He was the senior student of Mike. Carl went out and would go out and train with Dan, and bring a lot of what was going on out there through Bruce to the California people, a lot of his original students, bringing it home to East St. Louis, laying it on Mike. And then here's Mike, who was already a very innovative, very experienced fighter, and a really brilliant combat psych and tactical guy in his own right. Would take the drills and refine drills and present them to his students, the students here. And then, Carl, after being here and laying these drills, would go back. He'd come back with more, and this thing just started to evolve and evolve quickly. It's I'm trying to keep this concise here, but it's good for you guys to understand that, with initially with the Mike and Carl connection to California, right under the Bruce Lee umbrella there, specifically with Dan, you already had a guy in the form of Mike who was already very experienced in doing very innovative stuff with the Kung Fu that he originally learned in Boston. Here's a guy that had military experience, a lot of street fight experience. And what I find really fascinating, and Stan reminds us of this, is that the guys that Mike was training with, the Chinese guys, who, my understanding, they spoke very little English, and these guys were already in like this kind of street fight realism sort of mentality, the way they trained him. It wasn't like, you see representations of Kung Fu schools and everybody's got their nice clean uniforms and they're in their sashes and they're all lined up. No, these guys are street mentality already. And Mike already had some of that. So here he is. He just happens to be a brilliant, skillful guy. So he's training with these guys. He's already influenced by them. He already has the ways that he's modifying things, which I like to say this because in my mind, Mike was already a JKD guy before the acronym was out there because he was already innovating. And Stan has reminded me of this again recently that don't forget, like I remember when Stan and I first started training, when Mike would say, hey, Stan, yeah, okay, go ahead. And, you start doing drills with Ken and then you bring him over here and then I check him out. And that's kind of how we would go back and forth and do things. But I spent more time, Stan was my direct teacher and my training partner. Okay. Then we would go to Mike and Mike would say, well, better, here's what's missing or whatever. Or he, I'm sure he told Stan stuff on the side because they'd be talking over there. But then he'd put me through certain challenges. And it was interesting the way all that happened. But what folks got to know is that it wasn't like, Mike and Carl were here and Carl would go out for a few months and bring drills back. And then and Mike would just do them and teach them. It was more like an evolutionary process that was happening already. Okay. So here we are. We're three different representations of this, right? Three different representations of this. Okay. So we're planning to come together for the first time beyond the screen.
And that leads us to Stan. Stan, fill us in the points that we didn't cover that are salient.
Well, I think we're covering a lot of the main points because we're talking straight. We're talking from the heart and we're being, direct. So, you guys, as you express it, you bring your own perspective into it, which is definitely in line with mine because the fact that, we had a very unique martial artist in the name of Mike Sandler in East St. Louis who already had street credibility and validation before Carl brought back the Jeet Kune Do from training with Guru Dan Inosanto. So the interesting transition that I witnessed firsthand was that the fact that Mike was able to take the drills actually that Carl brought back and he would modify them and be very resourceful and creative in terms to actually sort of adapt him to his street fighting background and experience. So we saw something organic taking place. So it would be very difficult from what I can see and what I witnessed to actually duplicate what Mike did in East St. Louis, but it's definitely on par with my understanding of what Bruce's intention was, and that is for authenticity, self-expression, and more importantly, the freedom of self-expression so that you can find your own identity in the combat field. And with that self-identity and understanding, you can transfer to many different things in your life. It can go beyond just the combative aspect, but it can help in relationships, it can help in business. So there's many applications. So this is what I witnessed in terms of when I started and when I completed my training with Guru Mike. So I think, it's very exciting for us to come together. And although we're unique, because life journey is always going to be distinct, right? We can't live in one another's shoes. So we each have a distinct, unique life path. But the fact is that we're going to share a lot of our lessons and bring those together to give sort of a larger picture. So that's what we're planning on, to have an event that actually showcases this larger picture that we've accumulated over the years. So I'm very excited about this. And I'm looking forward to it, very much. I'm very happy with our work so far.
Wow. I mean, that was incredible. that was incredibly stated and made my babbling sound kind of amateurish there. But that was well said. Well said. And really, that's exactly right. It's one of the highest levels of things is to be self-actualized, and we each did that on the past. But we have a united core. We came from the same situation. We went through some of the same things. And that's why we can laugh about things, because we went through similar training at different periods of time. And I was the last one I was the youngest and the fastest, which we'll talk about because Mike played a game on me, which now it's not that funny now, but So anyway, but what I have to say about that is that what Stan said is a huge thing that we don't talk about too much, but it does have ramifications in other aspects of life. I know that, Ken, you say that about the business aspects, and you can go off on that for a second in a minute here, but I just want to reiterate that what Stan is saying is another part of this overall journey, and we're going to come together and basically reunite after all this time. We haven't seen each other in person in a long time, and so that's going to create a synergy that you can't miss, that you don't want to miss, because this is the Combat JKD branch, and I talked about it years ago and in magazines and videos and DVDs and things, but it hasn't been said. And that's one of the things that we want to pay tribute and homage to, is the fact that there is a Combat JKD branch. It's not just concept guys or the traditional JKD guys. There's another branch, guys who are actually fighting. And Mike Sandlin was the leading guy who did that. He had street fights before this, and then after he got it, he validated it in the street, which is what Bruce Lee wanted. He wanted a street fighting system that was validated through actually doing it. And Mike did that and handed that to us, and we went with that. But Ken, I mean, talk about the other, like Stan was saying, this is not just about fighting, right?
Right. I mean, and we were all fair guys right before we went on, and we were having a little bit of a conversation about this, is that, I think we probably all agree on this, that, the hardcore combative self-defense aspect, there are a lot of ways to go about that. And there's a way that obviously Christophe has refined, because this has been one of his key focus things, and it was mine years back too, to where, you can put guys in situations, and this is like getting guys ready for war, and you don't have 15 years to refine a bunch of techniques. You got to teach guys certain kinds of principles and drill them in certain kinds of ways that you're tapping into their intuitive and their instinctive abilities, and teaching them how to do all this when they're afraid, and how to overcome the fear and accomplish what it is they have to accomplish to defend themselves, right? Well, there's an accelerated version, which would be like what you would do with guys in boot camp, right? Then there's levels, Well, now you got the guys that are, they're through boot camp, and now they're into advanced infantry training, and so they're doing everything at a higher level. So there could be like another level of how you go even further, with what you're doing. Now you're adding in knife use, knife defense, handgun disarms, So there's things you can do to build layers and layers and layers of realistic self-defense training, but since it's an accelerated program, once guys get that, then they're kind of like, okay, well, I've got that now, and I'm done. It's like, well, we're teaching more than that, because what we're teaching is a philosophical approach to. It's like a metaphor, there are a lot of things that you learn. Let's phrase it this way. This is a phrase a lot of people know: conflict resolution. Well, the gross level of conflict resolution, and the gross way to train that, is have a guy in your face who's trying to take your head off. Okay, that might be level 1. Level 2 might be have 2 or 3 guys trying to do that at the same time. Then you go to another level. Oh, now there's not a knife or knives in the mix. Oh, now there's a handgun at close. So, you can keep layering this thing, but what it's all about, it's still all about learning how to deal with conflict at different levels of intensity, right? But you can take the metaphor of conflict resolution. You can creatively set up scenarios, which is a lot of what I learned from Mike Sandlin, and put guys in situations. And one of them can simply be how to negotiate a salary with your boss, because you're afraid of your boss. You don't know how to approach him. Or let's go over here and let's say how to deal with conflict in your relationship with your wife. Believe me, you can take the same principles from what we learn at a higher level in the training that starts with gross level fear-based conflict, and extrapolate that out into more refined versions of how to deal with conflict in all kinds of situations. And then turn around and apply the JKD analytic method for looking at things and extracting what's useful for you to create your own way of using those things, and now go off and apply it to business, which I did. My business training for starting 3 businesses, not including what I've done with martial art business, came from this. So
I think that the aspect of the what you're talking about here, to go a little bit further, this is what Stan has done more of than anybody that I know of. And Stan, is there anything that we left out there about the journey of the I guess the metaphysical, and it kind of reminds me of when Bruce Lee was trying to silent flute, because that's kind of the journey we're talking about. I mean, the movie ended up horrible. That was completed after his death or whatever. But the premise though of that is basically what we're talking about. Is it or is it not, Stan?
Well, it's not so much that I could add anything because you guys have touched upon, I think, the most important points. And Ken just brought up the most important factor when he spoke about fear, because my first encounter with Mike was framed in the way of intimidation. He wanted to test what abilities I already had, and that was my first lesson of failure. So, my test was that way. Should I continue to learn from this guy, or should I just walk away and find something easier to deal with? Let's say an easier art or whatever that will actually accept anything, no matter what, because they want me as a student. So he tried to push me away my initial encounter with him. He did not welcome me in. But that even made me more motivated, more curious about what is this person all about? Okay. And I simply stuck with it. But I think when you talk about the metaphysical, there's an abstract metaphysical and there's a practical metaphysical. And everything that I learned from Mike was practical, even the spiritual stuff. So when I learned the realistic approach that Mike gave us, I took those principles when I started to actually learn energy healing. And those are two diametrically opposite subjects. You can say, how on earth can you link energy healing with the type of combat realism that Mike was teaching? But for me, my life path, it was a natural progression, and Ken and I talk a lot about having the harmony. You can be one of the greatest fighters, but if your personal life is in shambles, you're not going to be a happy person, So I think you have to find a link from the martial art to the life art. In other words, they have to be balanced. So this is what my path has shown me, to have that balance. So.
Yeah, that's incredibly deep, profound area to go into, and we can't cover all that right now. But if you want to get more of that, I mean, be certain to stay tuned to us, because Stan will be back, and also this event we're talking about. We do know one thing for certain. It will be held in the greater St. Louis area, because we got to return to the roots. And we'll talk more about East St. Louis and the type of dangerous area that it was in upcoming talks that we'll tell you guys about. But I mean, you got a glimpse there. I mean, it's incredible. Combat JKD is more involved and more profound than what you think. With me, you get the direct and the obvious, the overt causes and what the solutions are. With these other guys, you're getting, wow, man, it's more than that. It has another aspect, which with me, if you train with me for a while, you'll start getting that. But I don't just initially start that way. But you're seeing the depth that Stan brings to this from his years and years of doing many different things. And you see Ken was able to apply it to other aspects of his life successfully. And I definitely agree with Stan saying, you can be great at one thing and other things can be wrong in your life. And it doesn't mean you're complete. It doesn't mean you're whole. I think we're all trying to become whole in a way, to sort of use lots of psychological terms we can do for that. Now that it may sound like we're getting 1960s on you, or early 70s, but there's an aspect of that has to be brought to it, because that was the culture that all this was brought into. But I just want to say that stay tuned, because Ken, Stan, and I will be back talking about more. And if you got any comments, put them below the video, and we'll try to answer them. Oh, and also, by the way, I got to say, O'Neill JKD is on Facebook. You can find it, O'Neill JKD. And of course, my stuff, Fluent Fighting. Here it is right here. All right. That's one of my main sites, and also combat-judo.com. And Stan is, we can link you to Stan. Okay. So we'll talk to you guys later. And I just want to replay this, because there's a lot of good stuff in here, a lot of good information. I just got to tell you how excited I am about this. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you guys later.